Hello and welcome. You're with Westferry Times for this deep dive. Really glad you could join us today as we really dig into quite a crucial and frankly fast-moving area, the current state of transgender rights here in the UK. We're aiming to break down some recent legal changes and, explore what they actually mean on the ground.
Yes, it's a really pivotal moment for this discussion. I think we've seen some quite significant shifts recently,
Yeah.
and it's so important to get a handle on their real-world impact.
Absolutely. And to help us sort of navigate this complex picture, we have Dr. James Thompson with us. Dr. Thompson is a very highly respected human rights advocate, comes with extensive experience in LGBTQ plus issues. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's get right into it then. The Supreme Court, they recently issued a ruling that redefined woman specifically within the Equality Act, clarifying it refers to biological sex. What's been the sort of immediate effect of that reinterpretation?
Well, the most immediate, and I'd say significant consequence, is really the potential for trans women to be legally excluded from single-sex spaces and services, those specifically set up for women.
Right.
So we're talking about vital resources like women's shelters, potentially public restrooms, even certain job programs designed to tackle gender inequality. And human rights groups have voiced, well, pretty serious concerns.
That it undermines protections.
Exactly, that it fundamentally weakens the protections transgender individuals were, understood to have under the Equality Act,
Yeah.
which is, as you know, the key bit of law meant to stop discrimination.
That does sound like it could have really far-reaching consequences. So following that decision, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the EHRC, they put out some interim guidance. What's been the general sort of reaction to that guidance?
It's been met with quite a bit of criticism, actually, from various stakeholders, including some people within the EHRC itself. There are pretty widespread concerns about, well, a perceived lack of inclusivity, maybe a lack of transparency, how it was all put together. Many people see it as a bit of a step backwards, potentially, giving ground to discriminatory practices. And a big point of frustration has been the feeling that there wasn't enough meaningful consultation with the trans community, the people directly impacted.
Right, that lack of consultation seems to be a recurring theme.
Yes, a feeling of not being properly heard, I think.
It's fascinating and maybe concerning to see how different groups are responding. We've also seen several Pride events. Glasgow Pride was one deciding to actually ban political parties from taking part. What's the thinking behind that? What's the message?
That's a really powerful statement, isn't it? Coming from the LGBTQ plus community itself. The main reason given is this perceived lack of, well, genuine and consistent support for trans rights from those political groups.
Okay.
It basically sends a very clear signal. Just showing up isn't enough anymore. The community seems to be demanding, concrete actions, proof of commitment to actually protecting and advancing trans rights.
Substance over symbolism, perhaps?
Precisely. It highlights that demand.
It really does underline the sort of strength of feeling around these issues. If we shift focus a bit to broader public feeling, there was a recent YouGov poll suggesting public opinion is quite divided on some of these things. What did that show?
Yes, the poll did indicate that a significant number of Britons do express some discomfort with trans individuals using facilities that match their gender identity. But, and this is crucial, I think, decisions about fundamental human rights really ought to be based on established legal principles, on evidence, not necessarily on public perceptions, which might, be influenced by misinformation or anxiety.
So there's a gap there.
There's definitely a challenge in bridging that gap, yes, between maybe popular sentiment and the need to uphold everyone's human rights.
And this Supreme Court ruling seems to be causing ripples elsewhere, too. For instance, we're hearing reports that teachers up in Scotland have raised concerns about their current policies on single-sex toilets in schools. How does this legal change affect things in schools?
That's a really clear example, actually, of the wider uncertainty this ruling has kicked off.
Yeah.
Teachers are now worried that their existing policies, which might have been designed specifically to be inclusive of trans students, could now clash with these new legal standards.
Right. Potential conflict.
Yes, and it's creating quite a bit of confusion, anxiety for schools, for staff. And there's a very real risk, unfortunately, of potential harm or discrimination against trans students as schools try to figure out how to navigate this changing legal picture and, meet their duties.
Healthcare access is another area we've seen major developments in recently, particularly thinking about the CAS review and then the restrictions on puberty blockers for under 18s. Could you just outline what's happened there?
Certainly. So after the CAST review, which was that independent look at NHS gender identity services for young people, the NHS decided to stop the routine prescription of puberty blockers for minors, except within formal clinical trials.
Okay.
And then following that, a high court ruling actually upheld a ban on private prescriptions of those medications too.
Ah, right. So both NHS and private routes are restricted.
Effectively, yes. And these restrictions have undeniably made it significantly harder for trans youth to access what many see as crucial medical help at a really critical time for them.
And the concern there is mental health impact.
Very much so. The worry is that these delays, these difficulties in getting appropriate care, can lead to severe negative consequences for their mental health and general well-being.
It does paint a concerning picture, these increasing barriers. If we look maybe more broadly internationally, ILGA Europe publishes that rainbow map each year, ranking LGBTQ plus rights across Europe. How's the UK been doing lately?
Unfortunately, the UK has seen a noticeable drop in those rankings recently.
Really?
Yes, which is quite concerning for a country that for a while was often seen as a leader on LGBTQ plus rights. It really acts as a stark reminder, I suppose, that progress on human rights isn't inevitable, it's not guaranteed, and without constant active protection and vigilance, rights can actually go backwards.
That's a sobering thought, isn't it? That progress isn't necessarily linear.
Indeed, it highlights the need for ongoing effort, ongoing advocacy.
So, given all these developments, these challenges we've discussed, what steps forward do you think are most important now? What can be done to sort of support and protect transgender rights in the UK?
Well, I think there's several key things. Firstly, fostering informed, respectful public discussion is absolutely vital
Yeah.
to try and counter some of the misinformation and prejudice out there.
Education, essentially.
Education and open dialogue, yes.
Hmm.
Secondly, actively supporting and, crucially, amplifying the voices of trans-led organizations. They're on the front line, advocating for their own community's needs.
Right. Empowering those directly affected.
Exactly. Thirdly, holding policymakers accountable, making sure they uphold fundamental human rights principles in legislation and policy.
Okay.
And finally, yes, those ongoing education and awareness campaigns are really important for shifting public perception over the longer term, building a more inclusive, more accepting society for everyone.
Some really clear points there. Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. Your insights have been incredibly helpful in, making sense of these really complex and sensitive issues.
Thank you. It's been a really important conversation to have.
And thank you, our listener, for joining us for this deep dive into the state of transgender rights here in the UK. If you are interested in learning more, or perhaps finding ways to offer support, we'd encourage you to look for information from reputable organizations. Transactual UK is one such example. Thank you for watching Westferry Times. Until next time, take care.